Nick Robertson ends the contract stalemate with the Buds, but the Leafs could still be looking to add competition to the left side. We'll discuss all that and more on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leafs centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. What's going on, Dave? How are you feeling on a Wednesday?
Man, it's
busy
eerie.
Wednesday.
Oh, it's
busy
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Holy busy one, and you see, it's always like when the players are getting into their media tours. That's when okay, we're almost pretty much there, back into it.
Yeah, did you see the photos? The "you love to see it" picture that the Maple Leafs posted out there on X.
That's an A+ caption, by the way.
Yep. First picture of Austin Matthews in full uniform, wearing the C on his chest while they're doing some promo photo shoots and whatnot. So that was nice to see. I don't know if we could pull that up. Actually, we should have prepped it to show. But for those who are watching on YouTube, so they can get a glimpse of that bad boy, because I did think that it was a pretty solid pick of the new captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But, busy couple of days for Brad Treliving, now they, the captaincy, that's done with now, right? We can move forward on that, but there's still a couple of final pieces of business to attend to. So here's what the captaincy looks like on Austin Matthews. You love to see it.
Those photos are also just so well done.
Oh yeah, I mean those are professionals there. Those are professionals getting that done. It's not you and I with our iPhone cameras, that's for sure. Snagging these.
I mean, look, the lighting and everything is just.
It's world class. It's professional. That's what it is. But yeah, so that's the first look, I guess, of Austin Matthews in full uniform, rocking the C on his chest, and we'll get to see it in a couple of weeks, I guess, when training camp starts up and we got games going on a couple weekends from now, an exhibition game. So that's exciting. You got some prospect games coming up this weekend with the prospect showdown against the Montreal Canadiens. The roster's been released for the prospect camp. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the breaking news that we had on Tuesday was Nick Robertson ends his contract standoff with the Toronto Maple Leafs and signs a one-year deal with the team worth $875,000. It was reported earlier in the summer that he had no intention on signing a deal with the Maple Leafs, would have preferred a trade out. He had requested a trade reportedly, but obviously no team stepped up to the table to offer the Maple Leafs what Brad Treliving thought was fair value for Nick Robertson. So he kind of has to come back with his tail tucked between his legs and sign this contract. What do you make of it? Nick Robertson back in the fold for this season.
I mean, it just seemed like the more logical option, right? At the end of the day, given everything that was happening, and it makes me also go what took so long for this to happen? For I wouldn't say cooler heads for someone just to say get the deal done.
Well, right? I mean, yes, get the deal done, but I think Robertson truly just, he probably still doesn't really want to be here, but it just took this long for him to realize hey, well, camp's looming and no team has met the price. Odds are, no team's going to come up and pay the price for me in the next couple of days. So I don't want to miss out on camp. I want to be start of things, not, off bad start with the new code if this is where I have to be for the next little bit. So I think it was just, him waiting it out ultimately, and then finally came to the understanding, there's no market for me. The Maple Leafs want me. There's a contract offer on the table. There's a spot in the lineup for him too, which is why it's so crazy that this year of all seasons is when he decided to kind of dig his heels in and try and get himself out of here. It's like, Nick, there's a spot for you to finally play a full 82 game season here if you can get it going. So I think it's good though that yes, cooler heads prevail. The Leafs didn't sell him off for pennies on the dollar, and Nick Robertson comes in. He can't afford to dig his heels and miss camp. He just can't. He hasn't played nearly enough games. He's been injured too much. His development has already taken such a beating. Can't afford to miss training camp with the new coach as well. So cooler heads prevail. They get the deal done. I think that there's an opportunity still, though, for Robertson to have a good year. And even to I wonder if even Brad Treliving still will have a line open for teams that want to trade him. And maybe eventually we see a trade request come through. But maybe Treliving said, look, here's a deal that's on the table. Okay. Come in and prove to other teams, not just us. Like, yes, you're proving it to us too, but prove to other teams that you are worth investing in and giving up assets for. Right now, no one's willing to do that. But come in, put in a good camp, get off to a good start, and maybe down the road and consider it if someone says, you know what, I'm ready to buy and invest on that kid. We'll give up that second round pick or third round pick or whatever the ask is. I think that's probably a strong possibility too. Doesn't mean Robertson's here long term. This could just be hey, let's get you into camp and see what happens type of deal.
Well, that's it, right? Like, I think when you see that, okay, he's signed, everyone kind of thinks, all right, this is now trending one way. It didn't make me see it that way. I'm just like, it just gets the contract done. And I think Frank Saravalli, when he tweeted out that, there was or was it Frank Saravalli?
It was Saravalli. It was Saravalli, but like, go ahead.
There was another, but somebody else had mentioned like the Leafs might have been worried that if they did all the moves that they want to do before Robertson, like there would have been an offer sheet, right, as well, thrown at him.
Yeah, that was kind of the Saravalli situation. Okay. And Dreger, I guess, mentioned getting Robertson done just takes away the threat of an offer sheet, I suppose. And there are corresponding moves that the Maple Leafs are reportedly getting ready to announce in the coming days. We'll get to that in a minute as well. The Saravalli report was that just because Robertson signs his deal, he is making it seem like a trade is still a possibility here, and that getting a guy under contract makes it easier to trade him away. The issue that I have with that is, why would a team give up an asset to sign Nick Robertson or to trade for Nick Robertson when they could have just offer sheeted him this entire time? Mm-hmm. And the Maple Leafs, obviously the Leafs are looking at a contract at $875K. Any other team could have offered him up to 1.5 million or 1.4. They could have offered him like 1.25, right? The Maple Leafs are not signing that. They can't. They don't have the cap space to do something like that. And they would have got that player for free without having to give up any assets. So that's kind of the question that I have with Saravalli's report. Saravalli was also, I don't want to down on him. Like, I still think Saravalli's a good reporter, but he also was wrong about the Mitch Marner thing. Would he give it a 5% chance Mitch Marner was a Maple Leaf after the draft? So I don't know if Saravalli's on the mark when it comes to the Maple Leafs at this moment in time. So I would take that one with a grain of salt. I think, not to say that a trade can't come through eventually. Like I said, if Robertson plays well and a team decides to make that trade and make that investment and pay the price that Treliving believes he's worth, then sure, a trade could come to fruition. But I don't think all of a sudden, because he's signed this deal, that it makes him more attractive. I actually think it makes him less attractive, because you could have got him without giving up any assets. It would have just cost you a little bit more cap space. And for teams who have a bunch of it, it really wouldn't have mattered.
That's the part that like, if a team really wanted Nick Robertson, they would have had him by now, in my opinion. Yeah. Like, if there was a lot of interest in him, the Leafs would have traded him by now, because then it would have just been like, one less thing we need to worry about. Get an asset in return, and they can kind of focus on the players on the roster that want to be there.
Yeah,
that clearly didn't materialize. And so, like, I think, and Dreger has been talking about how Berube has been talking with Robertson about the opportunities in camp and things like that. And to me, that speaks a little more true to what we've been saying, right? With everything that Nick Robertson's going through, there is an opportunity here. Just get yourself signed, get yourself in a position to compete.
Totally. I mean, you look at the left side, Could he, realistically, I think Matthew Nyes, I can pencil in as a top 6 guy, like, for sure. Outside of that, like, I could think Robertson outplaying Bobby McMahon for a spot. That's not to say I don't like McMahon. I don't think, McMahon won't be a good player for this team, but there's also a lot of question marks. It's a small sample size we've seen on Bobby McMahon, and he's dealt with a lot of injuries in his career as well, along with Nick Robertson. So, like, he could easily beat out Bobby McMahon. And then there's really not much other competition when you're looking at a top 9 role. Possibly Easton Cowan, if he blows the doors off in training camp this year, maybe he's someone who could compete for one of those top 9 spots in the left wing. But there's not a lot of competition. There is a role for Robertson within probably the middle 6, not even just top 9, but middle 6. And good on him for finally realizing it, I suppose. And hopefully he takes it and runs with the opportunity. And look, he's a guy who can shoot, he can score. He's shown that. We have 14 goals last year in 56 games. He can score, but will he, put it all together and play a little more of a 200-foot game? That's going to be the question that you have with Nick Robertson. And can he stay healthy? He did last year, but that's because he also didn't play every night. If he plays every night, can he remain healthy? That's another big question mark that you have with Nick Robertson. He will actually have, it sounds like, one more person joining the fold who could compete for a spot in the top 9 when it comes to the left wing position for the Maple Leafs. We'll tell you who that free agent could be on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You can customize your Game Time Picks, curate them to make it easier to save more on sports or concerts or comedy, theater events within the city. They've got all-in pricing. Great seat views. You can get a panoramic view from your seat right in the app before you even buy it. And the lowest price guarantee with Game Time, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What is it? Game Time. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday. We're back to full slate starting next Monday, actually. So next Monday, Monday through Friday, 5 episodes a week, all the way through the regular season, through the playoffs, and even through the first little bit of the off season. So starting next week, we're back to full swing here at Locked On Leafs. We're also close to 6,000 subscribers on YouTube too. We hope to get there by opening night. So if you are a daily listener and every day of the podcast, you have yet to subscribe, or you're enjoying the show and you're a first timer, please do. We'd appreciate that. And you can also find the podcast for you on-the-go listeners wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify or it's Apple or wherever you can get it. Just search up Locked On Leafs. You'll find them. So first order of business today was Nick Robertson's contract over and done with, and that is now in the books. And then Darren Dreger sent out a bit of a follow-up tweet. There's some stuff going on outside. I don't know if you can hear the sirens or not. Downtown Toronto, happening place. Can't hear the sirens?
No.
No? Okay, good. That the mic works, that this mic is not terrible because it only picks up the voices. But I swear there was a lot of sirens going on outside. Anyways, big report from Darren Dreger after the contract was agreed to and Nick Robertson's deal was announced. Report from Darren Dreger that now the focus shifts to Max Pacioretty and Jani Hakanpaa. That's next up on Tree Living's to-do list before training camp. Little unclear if it's like an actual outright signing of these two or if it's a PTO on these two players. But at this point, it does sound very likely that Pacioretty, at the very least, is going to be a Toronto Maple Leaf. What do you make of that?
Well, I just think that with Pacioretty, I know that the big thing was, can the Leafs entice him with just offering him a contract without doing the PTO, right? And I don't know how, given Pacioretty's injury history the last few years, that a team, unless you're a team that's capable of using a contract spot on Pacioretty, I guess that's an option. But I think for the Leafs, like, there's likely all right, here's a deal we're prepared to give you. Come to camp, get through it, we'll sign you, right? And I
Possible.
think I know a lot of people are like, I don't get why the Leafs are going after Max Pacioretty. Like, why do they need Max Pacioretty? Look at the lineup. Look at the depth at left wing. You need depth. You need guys that can score, right? Like, that's been the Leafs' problem. How many times in the postseason? Yes, they got really good options to score on the top six. Once you get to the third and fourth line, there's nothing there really. Now, is Max Pacioretty going to be competing for a fourth line role? I mean, he could be, but I don't think that's probably where I'd see him.
Really? I actually think that's probably where he lands as a fourth liner, third or fourth liner. Like, he's a bottom six depth piece.
Oh no, he's a bottom six guy. He ain't competing for a top six. I think like maybe third line at worst.
Well, or at best, however you want to look at it. But yeah, I personally think they're looking at him as a fourth line piece. I don't know. Like, I mean, it's semantics. He may get a chance to be on the third line, fourth line. It is what it is. But ultimately, it's a guy who has dealt with some injury, issues over the last 2 years. He's been limited to just 52 games, just 7 goals over those 52 games in the past 2 years, 26 points. So it's like, half a point per game, basically. So the offense hasn't been there like it was earlier in his career, in his heyday with the Montreal Canadiens as their captain. Once put up, was it 1, 2, 3, 4 straight 30-goal seasons for the Montreal Canadiens, and then went over to Vegas and put up another 30-goal season there. So he's had a lot of success in his career putting pucks in the back of the net. He's a guy who's been known as a power forward. He's not really a speedster, and especially after a couple Achilles injuries, not going to be that for you. So, I think that he is more of a fourth line, kind of grind it type of player at this point. Just, go up there and try and put the shoulder down, or just go to the net and try and bang out rebounds, be on the second power play and kind of be a net front presence type of thing, and be a leader in the locker room as well. That's kind of where I think he is at this point in his career. I don't see him being, a fixture in the top six by any stretch of the imagination, but I could certainly see, third, fourth liner. You bring in Max Pacioretty just for some depth, someone who can add a touch of secondary scoring from the bottom six. And I think it'd be a worthwhile pickup. If it's either way, it's going to be a cheap deal. It's not going to be anything crazy. It'll be similar probably to like Mark Giordano, where worst case scenario, if things don't work out, you could just send the guy to the minors and he'll probably or more so maybe like even like the Wayne Simmons situation, where if it doesn't work out, you could send the guy to the minors and he could just, ride off into the sunset, career over type of thing. And he doesn't even have to report to the AHL if he doesn't want to. Like that's worst case scenario for Max Pacioretty at this point, in my opinion.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting you bring up Giordano, because he was also, his agent was making the rounds. He was on, I think it was the Eric Francis show. He was on Calgary radio, basically talking about how, Mark Giordano still wants to play, still looking for a home. Like, they called around, right? The Leafs, the Flames, like a few teams, and I think the Flames said, not going to happen. I think the Leafs kept the door open a little bit, which
interesting.
It's interesting.
Maybe it's like Jani Hakanpaa insurance. Like if this Hakanpaa situation does not turn out, then maybe they go and bring in Gio again. I don't know. That would be an interesting situation, I guess, to bring him back again.
Yeah, I kind of figured like that door was closed. Like, to me, that's what it felt like. But I guess maybe like I understand like he didn't have a good year last year, but having a guy who's capable of stepping in when you have injuries, still, especially when you know for a fact that you're not expecting Mark Giordano to play every day. He's your eighth defenseman.
question for you. At what point do we start to like look at this Leafs roster and start to get concerned about like how old of a roster this is? Like even the young guys like the Marner, the Matthew, like they're not kids anymore. Like
Nope.
these guys are in the prime of their career. They're like mid to late 20s at this point. And then all the other veterans are like over 30. Like they brought in OEL who's 33. They brought in, Chris Tanev who's 33, 34 years old. Like you're bringing in Max Pacioretty, who's now 35 years old, right? Hakanpaa's in his 30s. Like they just continue to bring in these older players, and foot speed is still very much an important thing when it comes to the NHL. I wonder. I'm going to be curious to see how this plays out this year because it is going to look awfully different. Ryan Reeves is another guy who they brought in last year. Older player. Klingberg was an older player. And like they just continue to add these guys as opposed to letting their youngsters kind of maybe flourish and take a hold of opportunities. Like that's the one thing too. You look at bringing in, Max Pacioretty and Nick Robertson's now back into the fold. At one point we were talking about on Monday, like, hey, maybe Easton Cowan has a better opportunity to make the team, inject some youth into the lineup because there's open spots. Well, now there's more competition and it makes it, difficult. And look, competition breeds the best out of people. I get it. But it's like young and spry versus, old and injured. The tie is going to go to the veteran. But is that necessarily the best course of action for the Maple Leafs? I don't know. It's kind of what I'm thinking now when I keep hearing like they brought in Pacioretty. Now they're thinking maybe keeping the door open for Gio, Tanev, OEL. It's like, what is this, an old folks home we got here in Toronto? Like,
Yeah, like literally, like when you look at the off season and things, like Marshall Rafai was like one of the only few like deals when you look at the younger guys on this roster.
How old's Marshall Refi? Isn't he like 25? Like he's not super young himself either.
He is
like, I'm pretty sure he's like 24, 25. He's not a spring chicken here. I would imagine. I'm pretty sure he's been in the system for
26. So
26?
yeah,
he's older than I thought. He's already 26 years old. Like,
yeah, I no, it's true, right? But again, it's why we're looking at the Easton Cowans, the Fraser Mintons. But on the blue line, we've already made this case many times. This is where they lack. They don't have the young defensemen there that are going to say maybe someone in camp will surprise, but like that's been a sore spot. You need younger guys, more guys who other than Liljegren, right? Like
tell you, Simon Benoit is like what 25, 26. I believe he's like one of the younger blue liners that the Leafs have at this point. He may be younger.
He's 20. He's 25. Like it's him and Liljegren that are kind of like the youngsters.
Yeah,
but like those guys have they don't have a guy who's like hasn't played a game in the NHL looking to make a spot in camp. Like we haven't heard we're not hearing anything about like the Topi Niemalas or the I wouldn't say Noah Chadwick. He's going to go back to juniors. But like guys like that, we're not hearing about them because they're just not ready.
Why don't we take a break? Because why don't we come back and talk about some of these players? Because the prospect showdown roster was announced on Tuesday. We could take a look at it. The prospect camp begins today for the Maple Leafs, and some of these names that we're talking about, they're all going to be there. So we'll get a chance to hear how they all look after their off season, and maybe someone is looking to make a push for the Maple Leafs with a strong camp here over the next week or so. So let's come back, talk about some of the names we're keeping an eye on over the week as the prospect showdown camp begins. That's coming up next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
We're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. So join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that are using Indeed today. And listeners to the show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. So go to Indeed.com/locked-on and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you. And today, the Maple Leafs Prospect Showdown camp starts. There's going to be a couple of games coming up this weekend against the Montreal Canadiens, which will be kind of the scrimmage where we get to see these players in action. You started, rifling off a couple of the defensemen who might be able to push for a roster spot potentially, like Topi Niemelä, maybe a Noah Chadwick. Like those guys, they're going to be at camp. They're at this camp performing today. Who are some of the other names that you're kind of keeping your eye on that people should be having their ear to the ground on this week?
Well, obviously Ben Danford, first round pick. We haven't, I'm sure some people watched him in juniors, but a lot of people may not have. So be the first real chance to see him play. So he's one for me. Cade Weber, again, we signed him late last year. A lot of people obviously look at the guy with a lot of size and, maybe is a little closer to, I don't think he's going to play he could, you never know, but like you see a guy that can probably play a lot of minutes with the Marlies this year. Obviously we got, as you said, Easton Cowan. And then you look at the goalies, you got the two Russians and Hildeby. Like this is where you hopefully get to see your goaltending development, see how far that's come along, right? But the one name I don't see here, and I'm a little, maybe there's an injury or there's something we're going to hear a little later, but William Villeneuve is not on this roster.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because he would be one of those guys who, like, you think maybe could compete. Like, his last year in the American League, he was okay. It's a guy who won played really well in junior, former 4th-round pick. Yeah, you would think that he would be at a development camp such as this, but don't see him on the roster. You're right. So perhaps there's an injury, and maybe we'll find out. But hopefully he's good to go for training camp. Maybe he underwent some sort of surgery in the off season and they don't want to rush him in too quickly. I'm sure that news will come at some point. Those are pretty much the names that you're talking about. Nikita Grabankin, I'm actually excited to see to get a look at him. Someone who's been in the KHL for quite some time, but has made his way over to North America. I know that he did really, really well in the KHL as a youngster, which is a tough league to succeed in, especially when you are an NHL team's property. Typically, they don't love playing those guys and allowing them to develop. But, Grabankin had 19 goals last year in 67 games in the KHL for Magnitogorsk. So he's a player I'm excited to get a look at. Miroslav Holinka was a draft pick for the Maple Leafs this year. We'll get a chance to see him as he makes his way over here. Ty Voigt, possibly Fraser Minton. Get a chance to see Fraser Minton in action once again. So there's a couple of guys up front that you're excited to see. But yeah, Ben Danford, someone who I think a lot of eyes are going to be on him to see. All right, what's this kid look like right out of the gate? 1st round pick, defenseman. They spoke glowingly about him. Possibly could develop a bit of a two-way game. Can we see that possibly flourish throughout this prospect camp? So should be a lot of fun. Like I said, there is going to be a couple days of camp, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I believe, and then they'll be taking on the Montreal Canadiens. There's going to be 2 games. So it'll basically be like a split squad tournament type of thing. Where it'll be the Maple Leafs versus the Canadiens, and get a chance to see these guys in game action. So I'm excited. Should be fun to watch the Leafs of the future go at it.
Yeah, it's one. I think hopefully the format will be a little better than the Traverse City prospect tournament, because I think last year, like, one of the games you couldn't even watch because they had to move it to a different rink and there was no broadcast set up there.
Yeah, that was
Hopefully
brutal.
now that it's gonna be at the Bell Center, there's actually hopefully I don't know how the Canadians will. I'm assuming they're gonna make it presentable for people to watch. So
Yeah,
it'll be a very Montreal-esque broadcast. So
probably.
take a note of that.
Well, maybe they send Todd Crocker down there, possibly get a little
Little Leafs
coverage there. So I think that's what they did
Right.
last year, didn't they? Like Todd Crocker did it for like, and they broadcast on the Leafs YouTube page. I'm pretty sure.
Think so, and that's a possibility too. And if you're going to be sending guys, you might as well send Crocker. They usually do it for a lot of these tournaments, so it would make a lot of sense. So, I actually didn't get a chance to look at the Canadiens roster, see just like how much of the, like their top prospects. I'm assuming a lot of them are going to be there at the
I would think. Yeah, I would think.
Yeah,
that they'll have
Owen Beck's going to be there. Philip Mazar is going to be there.
Reinbacher there?
Yes, Ryan Bacher's going to be there. Lane Hudson's going to be there. Logan Mayu will be there.
What about who's the kid they took at 5th overall this year? Is he there? The forward?
Oh, the Russian forward. I don't see his name here.
No, he's probably because he's playing in Russia this year. So I think actually they're already underway.
Sean Farrell is going to be there. So
interesting. Sean Farrell. Okay.
Yeah, I don't see Ivan Demidov there. So.
Yeah.
So I think if he's nowhere close to being
well, I think the KHL season's underway already. So if he's playing in the KHL, which I kind of forgot, then they're not going to loan him out for a prospect tournament. I can guarantee you that won't be the case. The reason why the Leafs KHLers are taking part in this tournament is because they've now made their way over to North America and will be playing with the Marlies this upcoming season, like Grabankin, like Artur Tiamov and Vyacheslav Peksa. So which I'm excited to see those guys play because there's been rave reviews of them coming from the KHL. So we'll see if they can translate it onto North America ice. And this is kind of the first time that we'll get to see it. So I'm excited for it. All right, buddy. Good stuff. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast.
Well, Mike, unfortunately, Mike, computer went off at the wrong time, but well, and thank you guys for listening and for supporting the show. Make sure you follow the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcast from. And you're also subscribed to us on YouTube, so you make sure you get that content whenever it drops. And make sure you follow us on X at Locked On Leafs. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.